That's James's meal for today. Today it's hazelnuts. And I'm having basically the same thing but without cheese, and I'm going to have walnuts on mine. And I guess I'll show you the stack here. That's it. And James is going to start talking about Reagan, and I'll get to the other stuff later. So you'll see that's not quite the bottom of the stack now. But
well, there's something worse than this.
Yeah.
Anyway, poor John Voight, like casting this thing. John, buddy, like, are you one of these right-wing intellectual runts? And that's runt, not giant. Or are you just hard up for cash? When I see something like this, a mockumentary or whatever, I expect something like the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And the main problem with this is there's not the whole truth in here. I left a whole bunch of stuff out. So it reminds me a bit of a book called Commissar Disappears, and it documents how over the course of years, really, people who'd been liquidated by Joseph Stalin and his henchmen, more his henchmen. I don't think Stalin did too much killing personally in his life. He sure arranged for a lot of people to get killed. Millions. Tens of millions, really. Yeah. Tens and tens of millions. He would, when those people got liquidated in pictures that would be preserved for posterity, the people would just be liquidated in their images. So it eventually these pictures would look like the tooth of some povertacious homeless person, because like there's a blank here, there's a blank here, oh, there's Stalin, blank here, oh, there's Molotov and stuff like that. Most of the people would be missing. So they had nothing in here, as I recall, about the big stock market crash in 1987, the biggest since 1929. So what is that? We do a little bit of calculations, the biggest in 58 years.
Boy, that's loud. Helicopter.
It is a helicopter, that's what it's like. Anyway, I hope the person who's in there does well, because it's coming from the direction of the hospital, so I presume it's the STARS helicopter ambulance service. Probably going to Foothills. Good luck. Good luck. I've only been in an ambulance once in my life. Luckily enough, it wasn't American. It wasn't fun. It was short. They gave me some opioid, morphine, I guess. It's had a really bad back trouble. And so I didn't mention the stock market crash of 87. So if you watch this show, you'd get the impression that the economy was just going great guns under Ronald Reagan. Well, they had, I think the downturn, there was definitely a downturn, a recession, officially. Don't believe me? Check it out. If you don't check it up and you don't believe me, you're in Donald Trump territory, okay? But yeah, so there was one in 81, his first year, and really there would have been a recession. I'm not imagining things, okay? What happened was when the stock market crashed in 87, people went flying off to the real estate market. They took their money out of the stock market and put it in the real estate market. 2008, folks didn't have that option, and that's why everything crashed so badly. Because real estate prices might have been tanking even before stock market prices. So there are a lot of people who are in bad shape, whatnot. So really what happened was there was a delayed reaction, economic fallout after 87. That happened in Bush Senior's administration. Bush Senior didn't know much about how to handle economy. He was a foreign policy, I wouldn't really call him a wonk. He was a specialist. He was a former head of the CIA. It might have been only for 1 year. I believe it was 1975 under Jerry Ford. And people, I'm sure, wonder, what does that guy know about the CIA? Yeah, there was a guy called George Bush who was a contact for, I believe it was for the Warren Commission investigating into John F. Kennedy's assassination, called George Bush, CIA contact. And that wasn't in 1975. That was, I think they put out the Warren Commission before the election of 1964. That's 11 years earlier. And of course, the powers that be were going around saying, I'm not sure when, maybe as early as the 70s, maybe the 80s. Oh, it wasn't that George Bush. But it was. Think about it. George Bush Sr. was, he formed his own oil company. I think he's the one who formed it, Zapata, a Mexican revolutionary. And I'm sure he would have thought it was, I believe Zapata was a Mexican revolutionary. And maybe, was that from 1910, 1920, somewhere around there? That's when the Mexican Revolution is roughly bracketed. I think Zapata was loose. And I think it specialized in Latin America. This is the kind of folks that I don't know if it made much money at all. Bush was just down there snooping around, doing stuff for the CIA. Let's look at his background. George Bush Sr., Yale, and the Skull and Bone or Skull and Bones Society, or whatever it's called. It's basically a fraternity, something like a club. And he flew planes, but it was for the Navy. For the Navy. And you look at that background, those three things, Navy and Yale grad, rich kid too, and of course, and I think his dad, Prescott Bush, was a millionaire. And Skull and Bones was a secret society, kind of like...
At a time when millionaires were really something.
When they were something. It's not nowadays. Maybe almost the equivalent of a billion. And who had the share? Well, I've talked about it before. Bob Woodward? Yeah. The deeper throat. The deepest throat would be Dick Helms, or Richard Helms, head of the CIA in the into the 70s under the Johnson administration. He wasn't under Kennedy. He was high up in the CIA, but he had the same MO? No, same kind of curriculum vitae, or curriculum vitae, or VT, as maybe some people would say. I think the correct Latin would be vitae. Curriculum of life, same thing. George Bush Sr., he's he belonged to the CIA, he worked for the CIA, and he wouldn't be a flunky. Not even like Frank Sturgis or something like that. Way higher than even E. Howard Hunt, or E. Coward Hunt. At any rate, E. Howard Front, something like that, who actually had an Ivy League education, but it wasn't quite Yale. He went to Brown University. I think he graduated from there. So, what was I going to say about Bush baby? Anyway, 86. Yeah, poor Bush Sr. gets blamed for the economic fallout from the Reagan administration's economic misdeeds. You know, like it shouldn't be a big secret that you get these stock market crashes when you get and particular economic downturns when you get huge inequalities in income. So 2008, they were kind of pointing out, hey, you know, the inequality in income has reached the same level as that in 1929. The huge big stock market crash, and of course they had the huge big stock market crash in 2008. You know, like, why would that be? You see, like, you know, like when you got businesses churning out goods, and people are, the average person who buys goods, even the middle class, is getting poorer and poorer, and there's a little bit of an economic downturn, they can't buy all these goods that sit in warehouses and stuff like that. And there ends up with this economic spiral, a downturn that turns into a spiral. You know, it's not a big secret. If you're producing goods, you got all these big rich capitalists producing goods, and you can't sell them, well, you end up in a depression. Yeah. You know, it isn't good for the economy for people not have money to spend on goods. Even an idiot like Henry Ford understood that. He said, hey, I'm going to pay my workers a decent, not just living wage, but buying wage. Why? Because I want them to buy my Model Ts. Yeah. Even he understood that, and that was way back when, 100 years ago, I think. Okay? So, you know, there was this kind of lie, and they said, oh, the American economy never had it so good. Yeah, you know, like under Reagan and Bush, I won't say it never had it so bad, but it was stunning what they had. They had 2 economic downturns in the space of 12 years, which is more than the Democrats had had. They'd been in roughly the same amount of time. When I say roughly, it's like within 2 years, between 1947 and then. And they'd only had 1 in all that time. And there are the Republicans strutting around. We can handle the economy. We've got our hands on it, right around the neck, and we're choking it. Not quite to death, but choking it. That's the Republicans since 1947, and actually going well before then. They were out of power, of course, from 1930, and deservedly so, from early 33 to 47, and all the way through to early 53. Deservedly so. But you look in the 20s, yeah, everyone's going, the roaring 20s. Pauline was talking about people getting a misconception of the 80s. Oh, you know, like the egalitarian 80s? No, what would you call it? It's definitely not the egalitarian. The exciting 80s or whatever. You know, like there was a bad economic downturn, pretty bad in 81. And then there was the stock market crash in 87. You know, the people don't realize it. In the 1920s, and the Republicans were in for almost every year of 1920. 1920 itself, it was still the Woodrow Wilson administration. There were, count them, 3 economic, well, they called them depressions back then, but 2 of them would be calculated as recessions during that period. Say what? You know, everyone's going, wow, you know, like the economy was cooking in 1929. No, the stock market was cooking. It was a bubble stock economy or something like that. The economy had hit some sort of a peak, but it was roughly the same peak that was hit at the end of World War II by the Wilson administration. Same peak. So the economy wasn't cooking nearly what we're told, the roaring 20s. It wasn't roaring any more than it was in 1918. Now, a lot of that had to do with Americans producing war goods. But you know, under Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the Democrats got the economy cooking to this, basically the same level as it was in 1929. Now, there had been, after World War I, a depression. Not even in today's terms of recession, because the American industry had to retool. Industry around the world had to retool. They've been producing war goods and stuff like that. So there was a crash for a while. But the depth of that depression wasn't anything near what the Republicans did from 1929 to the end of 1932. Stunning, the depression that they took it, and then FDR took it out. They had one glitch in 37. It was a deep but not very long depression, and then boom, boom. Before the Americans got into the war, or were forced into the war by the Japanese, they basically got up to the same economic level of production coming from the toilet as there was in 1929. So you could actually say the roaring 30s, the roaring latter part of the 30s under the Democrats, and the same level back in 1918. You don't believe me? Check it out. If you still don't believe me after that, you're in La La Land. You're a Donald Trump supporter for life, and probably for your 9 cats' lives or 8 cats' lives afterwards, because they'll be using your name for voting even after you're dead, getting your name off your tombstone and stuff like that. And it'll be the Russians doing it for the Republicans. Okay? So, check it out. So, that should be pointed out. It wasn't so much that the American economy was going great guns or anything like that, going great missiles, and forcing the Russians to try to keep up with military overspending and stuff like that. It was, they mentioned it a little bit. Oh, Ronnie got the Saudis to flood the oil market with oil and force the price of oil down. They really didn't talk that much about what that did to the Russians. I think they were saying, oh, that really got the American economy going, and that helped. But the Saudis were doing it to fight the Russians. Why? Because they were fighting, they were funding the Afghans against the Russians. You know, they were fighting Russia economically, and the Americans were. But here's the deal. Here's the deal about the prosperity and all the spending. You know, this guy spent a lot of money on the military, and he cut taxes for rich people. Now, we were hearing after that, especially here in Canada, oh man, we've got such a huge debt load, we'll never pay it off. All you left-wingers, you're giving this horrible legacy of debt to your children, grandchildren. The per capita debt, I don't know what it is now, but last time I checked, was lower than it was after World War II. Per capita. And that's the important thing. If you got 1,000 people and they're running a $10 debt for each one of them, that's $10,000. If it's one person running $10,000 debt, you tell me which is easier to pay off. Now I'm exaggerating, but that's the deal. The per capita figure is important. Not the total figure. American population is a lot higher now than it was then. So if the debt creeps up higher than it was after World War II, it should be easier to pay off. What is the difference? The difference is rich people don't pay taxes, or at least they don't pay their full share. We watched this, I've mentioned it before, wonderful documentary that Pauline got out of the library here. And it was awesome. You had all these billionaires complaining about the tax rates that they paid. So there was one flunky there who was grumbling and complaining about paying 8% tax rate. That's 8%, I'm not exaggerating. And he was complaining about it. It was too high for him. And Warren Buffett was there, owner of Coca-Cola and all sorts of things. And he was complaining about 13% tax rate. But Warren Buffett contributes to the Democratic Party. At least last time I checked he did. I'd be very disappointed in him if he were contributing to the Republican Party, particularly after Donald Trump. But what he was saying was he paid too low taxes, and he was telling the truth. Okay? 13%. That's way too low. Way lower than average middle class people pay up here in Canada. And I presume in the United States, 8%. Absolutely shameful. And that's what's happened. What this guy did is he consigned the kids, grandkids, great-grandkids of the people that voted him in and the people who didn't vote him in to, I guess, perpetual debt right there. Because he didn't tax the rich, kept on taxing the poor and the middle class particularly. And he drove the United States into debt. And they're not paying it off. They're getting deeper and deeper into debt because they keep on running into flunkies like, in order to pay taxes, people got to earn money. And when they're unemployed, as they were in the last year of Ronald Reagan's flunkydom, and the first year and the last year of the Bush Jr. thing, guess what? They don't have money to pay taxes. Middle class and poor working class people. They don't have money to pay taxes. That's why when Pauline did a study, I believe it was 2010, but the same thing would hold. The figures wouldn't have changed much. These guys were worse. The Republicans were worse. Going back to 1947, were worse than the Democrats, and they've been in roughly the same amount of time. 1 or 2 year difference. When I say roughly, I'm not, lying with figures or stuff like that. And they were worse on handling the debt and deficit. So this guy didn't win the Cold War. If it was won economically, outside of the Saudis doing their bit, and it was a huge bit, I'd say more than 50%, it was won by the poor and working class people paying taxes, middle class as well, and their sons, their kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, on and on and on. This guy did it on the backs of the poor and the middle class. Take that, you David from.
All right, well, we have 6.5 minutes.
Sorry about that.
No, that's cool.
I'm tired of this sort of nonsense. And Dennis Quaid or whatever you are, you're Dennis the Menace. You're about as smart as him. Get lost. You get a life.
Anyway, yeah. So James watched the movie yesterday, and he said it was even worse than.
Oh my! He listened
it
in the background and
I was
trying to stop my gorge.
I told
rising.
him, "Why are you watching it? It got bottom of the stack rating."
Well, I got to document it because I don't want to go say he didn't. They didn't cover. It was, I don't know if it's a vanity publishing project for Dennis Quaid, but I wanted to make sure that they didn't deal with the stock market crash. I figured Pauline would have noticed that, but she might have missed it. It wasn't there. They didn't deal with the deficit and debt and all that sort of stuff, the overspending on military, the undertaxing of rich people.
I mean, you were talking about Nancy Reagan really being the unofficial vice president.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to, if I survive long enough, I'm going to write something called the Imperial Vice Presidency. Not under Donald Trump. I mean, his supporters wanted to whack Pence, or whatever his name was, dollars and pence. But the Republicans, since Eisenhower, have had this imperial vice president, Richard Nixon. Now, Nixon didn't have one because he was still the imperial vice president. But George Bush, who was his vice? Dick Cheney. I think he was his vice president. He was the imperial vice president.
But really the president.
Yeah, exactly right. He was making the decisions. Yeah. And a lot of the stuff he let Donald Roosevelt, that's actually his boss. Oh, it was appalling. And then who was, well, that's only two. But with Nancy Reagan, with Ronald Reagan, it was Nancy. It wasn't George Bush Sr. They would have done a whole lot better under him because George Bush actually at least understood foreign policy. George Bush Sr. George Bush Sr. Jr. was a failed. Well, you look at this guy, Reagan. What was he? He was a success at being a lifeguard. I think they were lying about the number. They were saying Ronnie said he saved 77 people in his life. Do you know any lifeguards here in Lethbridge?
I've known a couple, but
Yeah.
they're not whirlwinds of activity.
No. So one is
lifeguards.
nice
They
person.
can't be. I mean, they have to be observant,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they can't be like reading books or anything like that because they have to be watching for people drowning. So
I've worked with
they're
two.
basically security guards.
Yeah, worked with two. One I went to university with, and very nice person. I'm not going to talk about her. The other I worked with, LP. Awful. About the worst person I ever worked with on a crew. So you know when you're talking about a lifeguard, they've got to save people. You know, like that's just their job. You know? That doesn't make them qualified to save the world or the United States or the universe or whatever.
No, but that's cool. I think everybody should swim.
They should.
I don't swim well, and worse now that my back is bad. I can't. Like I used to be able to swim on my back and float, no problem. But now my back can't bend that way. I can't float on my back, so that sucks. Anyway,
Anyway, that doesn't make him a hero.
No.
You know what I'm saying? Doesn't qualify him for much of anything except to be a lifeguard.
Yeah. So I was going to mention that after we collided, I put this on the bottom of the stack. I believe that I've watched it in the past, and I feel very badly that I wasted my time watching it once, let alone twice. It's really bad. And really everything here, the Midsummer Murders, they're watchable, right? They're somewhat entertaining. But the rest of this stuff, I don't know why people make it, and do people actually watch this? Like after we collided, so it says it's based on the best-selling worldwide phenomenon. So how
How did they get
Anyway.
cast? This one maybe got for the looks, but
Yeah.
not that special.
Anyway,
Maybe this guy's special without the glasses. Well,
it's I don't know. It was really, I don't see a point to it. So that's why this wasn't quite bottom of the stack today, because I see absolutely no point in this. This was just a couple people having sex, often a couple young people, and you don't even see boobs and stuff. So
yeah, and you don't even know if it was
so
their
that's why
idea.
this one got put above
Yeah.
both of these, because the swing of things, they a couple going to get married in the Bahamas, their plane, due to weather, their plane lands in Jamaica. They have to land in Jamaica, and so they have to cancel. They won't make it to their wedding in the Bahamas, so they decide, okay, well, I guess we're going to marry in Jamaica. And somebody at the airport, cabbie, says, oh, I know this great place, I'll take you there. And it's a swingers resort. And so there's like nude swimming, and like, so there's naked people all over the place. So at least this one, if you're interested in seeing attractive bosoms and
Butts, maybe.
big penises in Speedos, which honestly I don't know how they managed to contain some of that into some of the swimwear that was
Okay.
yeah, and in fact I don't think they did. There's one scene where there's a man, you're watching basically his penis while he's dancing in this Speedo, and I think the tip is out the leg hole. If they pan away from that, because I think the cameraman realized, oh my god, his penis head is out the leg hole, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
but I think you see it. So